In this episode, Tom and Megan take up Firefly Episode 2, The Train Job. So Megan, we're to Episode 2. Where should we begin?
We're talking about the train job on Firefly. Let's talk a little bit about the new job that they have acquired. What exactly is the train job? And I think importantly, who gave it to them? So what did you think about it?
So this is just as classic a Western trope as you can have. The train job. And overlaid with an incredibly cool science fiction component, which is they're going to fly the spaceship over the train and lift up the cargo. Although that could have been a helicopter. I've seen that happen before. And that was cool in and of itself. The bad guy is a bad guy. Not that I would ever characterize Italians as bad guys, but he was about as mafioso as you can get.
Oh, I got Russian from him. Yeah.
Oh, Russian mafia. Yeah. Organized crime. He's a bad guy. I was really intrigued with his bouncer, Muscle. I thought he was going to be somebody I was going to deliciously enjoy. That turned out to be short-lived. But I really enjoyed just the train robbery. I thought that was cool. And then the Alliance soldiers, I have to say I was a little confused by that because I didn't understand or appreciate when they first saw them. I thought they were there to guard the cargo. And it turns out that was not true, and that becomes a plot point later of what they were there to do. So what sort of from these opening scenes really you either appreciated or enjoyed?
Yeah, like you, I absolutely love Niska as the bad guy. I think it says something really interesting about the kind of universe they can have, not going to have multiple really big, really well-organized crime syndicates or families or however, or planets maybe. And I thought it was, because Niska was a known entity to Captain Reynolds and to most of the crew, it felt like they were really taking a big risk going to take this job because Niska had a reputation as someone not to be messed with that was demonstrated to be true by the murder of his nephew, even in the face of an earful from his wife. So yeah, absolutely clear bad guy, and some real serious need for income for the crew. It's kind of interesting to see science fiction where money is so important and acquiring it is such a plot driver. So I thought that was pretty cool. And then of course we both love a heist, and this was a cool heist with a spaceship lowering a cussing Jayne onto the roof, not the lid of the train. The lack of questioning about what they were stealing I thought was really interesting. I get the impression from this that Captain Reynolds, I think he talks a lot tougher than he is. And they don't care about the job. They'll do anything for money. And now we learn over the course of this episode that is plainly not true. It is absolutely plainly not true.
So they're able to effect the theft, but I'd like to stop there because I'd like to go back to the opening scene in the bar.
Oh, yes. Unification Day.
Unification Day is when the Alliance wins. And I guess what surprised me, Megan, was not that there was a Unification Day, but this far out, I would have thought there was less love for the Alliance. But clearly there's a group of people who do support the Alliance, and through some prodding of Mal, they taunt him enough that he gets in a fight. And I loved it when she got thrown through the virtual window. I thought that was so cool. You're in the middle of technological mayhem. They have a virtual window. So yeah. I thought that was cool.
I love the moment. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead. No, go ahead.
So I love the moment just before that when Malcolm is talking to the Alliance supporter and is getting him stand up all up in your face. He says, "Oh, I'm not going to do anything. She's behind you now." Delivering the punch. Oh, beautiful.
So that was cool. And sort of comic relief, but really driving home a bigger point. But so back to the train robbery, they get the cargo off, but they are caught. And not just they are caught. The robbery is discovered. They are not caught as the thieves, but they're caught up with everyone on the train. And so they at some point are questioned and really have a very bad cover story. They really need to work on their cover story.
They came up with it on the fly. It was never the plan to be caught. They were supposed to fly up back to the ship with Jayne. But what was interesting is then that's when they learned, when they were caught up with everyone else, they learned exactly what they had just stolen, to a realization of horror that they had participated in that.
So there's a couple of minor points in all of this that really struck me. One was, I mentioned in our prior episode, my enjoyment of the terraforming. And we got some further clarification about how terraforming works because the sheriff who's interrogating our heroes says that an unintended consequence of the terraforming coupled with gas coming out of mines created a degenerative, deadly disease, a fatal disease, and that everyone on the planet has it simply because they've breathed the air created in the terraforming. And I thought that was really interesting to terraforming. We also see the Alliance, and also we mentioned in the prior episode, the Alliance Command Center. And this is where I really began to think that this is not the Empire. These are Bozo 1 and Bozo 2. Because the sheriff asks for some help to find the culprits and hopefully get his medicine back. And the Alliance says, I don't have time for no stinking medicine. We're here to do big, important things, and you ain't it. Completely oblivious to the existence, an existential threat to the existence of this colony. And it was said in a way, if it had been Grand Moff Toph, he would have said it in an authoritative way, but I thought the way this Alliance commander said it was just buffoon-ish. So went down a notch in the Empire standing for me with those two scenes.
I thought that was really interesting too, because it came up a little bit in the last episode and a lot more in this one, just the lack of interest that the Alliance of the Central Planets have in the outer worlds. Once they get it terraformed, they'll just drop people on it to live them. And that makes me think that the whole purpose for this terraforming and for all these extra worlds is just to get rid of excess humans. Ship the poor out, ship the homeless out, so that you don't have to deal with them in the Central Planets.
Can you say Canada? Australia?
Yeah, Australia very much. And I mean, it even happens now, cities shipping their homeless from one place to another. But right. I think it was less buffoonery. I took it less as buffoonery and more as, this is just a salaryman doing his job. And his job is to deal with Alliance stuff and not worry about these wastes of space who are just occupying the planet. He's got other things,
Nameless bureaucrat.
Exactly, yeah. I liked what Captain Reynolds said about it is unify all the planets under one central control so that everyone can be interfered with or ignored equally.
So Mal and crew recognize what the medicine is. They attempt to give it back, and they end up doing so to the sheriff, who has figured out where their ship is because they're waiting for Mal to get back.
After a rather marvelous rescue by Inara, which is one of my favorite parts of the episode.
Oh, yes. Inara rescues him literally because of her standing as a companion. And so you pointed that out in our last episode, that the role she had was not only thought of, but very honored as well, so that she was able to literally waltz in and say, these are mine. They're my indentured servants.
And have everyone thank her for her presence.
Yes. Yes. I guess the scene where the sheriff and Mal meet with the medicine also struck me, because the sheriff essentially, I think it was the sheriff, who said it's not the evil in men's hearts when they do something, it's the evil in their hearts when they find out the consequences of what they've done. And that's, in his mind, what makes a man evil or not. And that meant, Mal stole it. He didn't know what it was, found out what it was, and returned it. So I thought that was a pretty good part, pretty poignant part. But I absolutely loved his interrogation of the muscle guy. I can't remember his name. Crow, and who's able to track the ship down pretty quickly and say that you welched on the deal and we paid you half. And he tries to give the money back. The guy says no, and he kicks him, and he goes into a jet port of an engine. And I absolutely love that. The only thing that, in my mind, could have been better if we'd seen the splat coming out on the other side.
I thought that was so funny, too. And I was researching a little bit about this episode, again, because there was so much fuss with the network around the pilot. And I think Fox had wanted Crow to be a long-term bad guy, someone who's going to be big and tough. And Justin was just like, no. We are going to get rid of him in the most humorous way possible. Yeah, I loved his colleague as well, who was then put in the same situation, given the same speech. It was just like, no, I'm with you. We're on the same page. No need to jet engine me. Yeah, this is great.
So we do have a little foreshadowing of some trouble at the end because we see some blue-gloved agents of the Alliance come to the command center that we had seen the buffoonish or at least bureaucratic Alliance commander leading, and basically said, we have a problem and here's our problem. So it's clear the Alliance is after her, and I think that's going to provide a lot further adventures, but I really like those guys.
I thought it's really interesting how River is obviously quite addled. There's definitely things that have happened and are happening in her mind, but she has awareness of what's going on in regards to the Alliance and her. The 2x2 hands of blue, deliciously creepy. And that kind of reveal at the end I thought was great. What did you think of Jayne in this episode? Did your opinion change from the last one?
Actually, it did, because I didn't think he was as cartoonish as he was in the first one. I think there was a couple of scenes where he lipped off that indicated, as you suggested, perhaps a lack of an overall 160 IQ. He's not blonde, so we can't blame it on blonde. But I thought he was moving closer to being more silent. And that's what I want. So I don't know if I just saw what I wanted or he really did take it down a level. But the interesting point would be, this was not the first episode filmed, as you noted. It was the first episode aired. So sometimes when you get episodes shown out of order from their filming, it shows differences that the director didn't intend or the producer didn't intend to show. I like the way he developed, but this was shown first. So if I'd seen this way back when it came, I would have been really confused.
Yeah, the question of Jayne's loyalty at the beginning of the season is a really interesting one. Can he be bought? He certainly acts as if he can be bought and is seemingly willing to always act in his own self-interest at the expense of the crew, unlike almost every other member of the crew. So I think he's an interesting character from that perspective.
I was also interested in the preacher because clearly there's a big backstory there. And whether he's been the pastor to some very bad people, whether he was a very bad person, clearly he's not been sitting around reading his Bible for 30 years exclusively. He knows first aid. I think he probably knows how to wield a weapon. And so I'm really interested in him. I think we're going to have a lot of fun with him.
Oh, yeah. He got some great punches in the last episode, too. Yeah. Where does a preacher learn to punch like that? I don't know. Any final thoughts on Train Job before we wrap it up for this week?
I don't know if it scratched my itch of seeing Westerns when I was a kid or not, but I really love just the thought of a science fiction show about a train robbery. And just that alone warmed the cockles of my heart. So I was all in when I saw the name of it. And then the train, also it was not a train on tracks, either a magnetic train or other elevation above the track. So I thought that was a nice nod to some science fiction.
Oh, awesome. I knew you would love the Space Cowboys. Perfect.
Any final thoughts from you?
I don't think so much. I think I continue to be excited to examine these episodes in these new ways, being able to compare it to the different franchises that we talk about. And there's some really fun episodes coming up. So I'm just excited to talk about them. All right. Till next time. See you, everybody. This is Tom Fox again. Thanks so much for listening to this episode of Because That's What Heroes Do. If you've enjoyed this podcast, I hope you will subscribe or rate and review this podcast wherever great podcasts are listened to. The award-winning Because That's What Heroes Do is a production of the Compliance Podcast Network.